All 54 new cards that were revealed today are going to be covered in this review. That's right. All of the remaining Rise of Shadows cards are right here, right now.
Hey, buddy, watch this.
All right, one last time. The quick reviews link is in the description. The detailed reviews are up next. Potion Vendor is a new 1-mana neutral card, 1/1 Battlecry, restore 2 health to all friendly characters. That's a really big effect on a 1-mana minion. We've seen it succeed in the past with cards like Fungal Enchanter and things like Heal Zoo. We have this new Heal Druid thing that might work well with this card too. So for a 1-mana card, this looks like it packs a really big punch, and I think it's going to be a strong card. Dalaran Librarian's a 2-mana 2/3, Battlecry, silence all minions. This is fantastic flavor. Beyond that, this card works well in any sort of silence archetype, which it looks like Priest might have an option there. Other classes might want to use this just to remove any sort of negative effect either. So it's not going to be one of those cards you see every day, but it does have enough power to enable other sorts of things, so keep an eye on it. Convincing Infiltrator, a new Priest card, 5-mana 2/6, taunt. Death Rattle, destroy a random enemy minion. So this is a bit like a baby obsidian statue without the lifesteal. And I think it's actually an interesting card, whether you have Death Rattle synergies or not. This is still going to be a really disruptive and interrupting force on turn 5, where you stall out some minions, you remove something of your opponents. Can even be good in the late game too. So I think the flexibility and the impact of this card are high, and it's probably going to be a good one. Hinch Clan Shade Quill is a 4-mana 4/7 Death Rattle, restore 5 health to the enemy hero. Obviously here we have a minion that's a little bit overstated over something like a Chillwind Yeti, which can be nice. High health totals are good for Priest. This Death Rattle might look like a downside, but you can do 2 things. One is silence it off with a new Silence Priest archetype that's a possibility. Beyond that, you could actually use it aggressively if you're playing with things like Arcane Soul Priest. So maybe you could use it as a damage card. Despite all that, though, I don't think there's quite enough upside here. A little bit too difficult to use the Hinch Clan Shade Quill, so probably won't be a really powerful card. Arcane Watcher, 3-mana, 5/6 neutral minion. Can't attack unless you have spell damage. So super overstated for its cost, right? Way bigger than a 3/4 even. It's a 5/6. That's a crazy stat line. We haven't seen this before on a 3-drop. And that means if you can get it to work, it's going to be amazing. So 2 things could happen here. Silences, or you silence off this effect, or you just run it in a spell damage deck. Although the upside is here on this card, I do think it's going to be a little bit awkward making it work. So it certainly could pop into a deck because of how big the stat line is and how aggressive it could feature itself, just doing a ton of damage. But most of the time, it's probably going to be too awkward to use and a little bit inconsistent. Unsleeping Soul, a new Priest spell, 4-mana, silence a friendly minion, and then summon a copy of it. Again, more silence support for Priest. Seems like there's some interesting cards to use this with. Anything that's overstated for 4 mana is going to feel good, and if you need the silence baked in, then sure, Unsleeping Soul makes a lot of sense. That said, still an archetype that's unproven, untested. We don't know how good it's going to be in the upcoming meta, so not a guarantee, but a card that certainly has some possibilities. Proud Defender here, 4-mana 2/6 neutral taunt, has +2 attack while you have no other minions. And I think this is a pretty cool little card. Reminds me a bit of Tar Creeper, a mid-game taunt with a little bit of upside in certain conditions. And I think most of the time, if you're playing in a control deck, defensive deck, dropping this down, it's going to be a 4/6 taunt for 4, which is a little bit better than, maybe a Sinjin Shield Master, sort of the vanilla stat line classic. That said, I don't know that it does enough. It's not always good. It's a Stegadon a lot of the times, which isn't really a great card to play. So I don't know that every deck's going to make room for this in a control world. I think there are probably better options for most decks to serve defensive purposes. So despite this looking okay, certainly great in the arena and those sorts of things, a card that probably falls short in constructed. Up next here is the Soldier of Fortune, a 4-mana 5/6 elemental neutral minion. Super cool artwork. It reads, whenever this minion attacks, give your opponent a coin. Very little upside here in the stat line. It's just a tad overstated, and that's a huge downside. Giving your opponent a coin can backfire in major ways and cross a variety of different decks. So I don't think this card makes the cut, even in an elemental deck or a super aggressive deck. The downside here is far outweighing the upside, so this card is often probably going to be detrimental to your causes, therefore I think it's not going to see play. Moving on here, we have the Waggle Pick, a new 4-mana 4/2 for Rogue. Death Rattle, return a random friendly minion to your hand. It costs 2 less. And this card looks great. 4-mana 4/2. We've seen that stat line work really well in Hearthstone on weapons in the past. That alone makes it reasonable. The Death Rattle also has a pretty big upside. Could arguably be a downside sometimes, but if you're playing this, it's probably for a reason where you want to bounce things back to your hand, utilize their battle cry, whatever effect they have. The discount is also nice too, so Waggle Pick to me looks like an obviously strong card. Inferno, new 3-mana warlock spell. Give your demons +1 attack and deal 1 damage to all enemy minions. I think this is a neat little card. We know whirlwind style effects like this, Maelstrom portal effects are pretty good in Hearthstone, and +1 attack on demons is also a little bit of upside. So you get some buff action and a little board swing flip. You might only need 1 or 2 attack to make this feel pretty good from a cost efficiency standpoint. And you know what? Even if you don't need to deal 1 damage to all, sometimes the little demon buff might be enough to set up lethals. The real challenge for a card like this is, are you running enough demons to make it worth it in your deck? Does the zoo deck have to run other sorts of things? That's probably going to be the check on this card's power level of anything, but it still does some very positive things. Mana Reservoir, a new 2-mana neutral minion, 0/6 elemental with spell damage +1. Love the artwork here. I like the idea too of a really sticky spell damage minion with 6 health that's hard to deal with. It's something you're kind of banking on it surviving so that you can keep it into the next turn or even in the same turn and do some spell damage shenanigans. That said, I still worry about it. This stat line is not a favorable one. It doesn't take many early game minions to trade into this thing, so then it just kind of serves as a heal. I don't know, therefore, what deck is looking to run this exactly. It's going to have some big upside on the spell damage for it to make a lot of sense. So I have a feeling it's probably not going to see play, but the possibilities are there. If you just have to have spell damage for other cards we saw before, like our Watcher, then it's a possibility. I just am doubtful. Magic Dart Frog, new mage minion, 2-mana 1/3 beast. After you cast a spell, deal 1 damage to a random enemy minion. This might be the exact tempo mage engine that's necessary. It's a bit like Flame Waker of old. It only hits minions, so it's not quite as aggressively minded, but it's a little cheaper, so you can flex it into turns, helps you swing the board early. It might almost be an advantage in some ways just to make sure you kill your opponent's stuff before you have to worry about going face. So I think this has a lot of potential to make Tempo Mage a powerful, actual tempo-based deck, and therefore will be a pretty strong card. Magic Carpet, 3-mana 1/6 neutral minion. After you play a 1-cost minion, give it +1 attack and rush. I don't think this card has quite enough upside on the buff here to make it worth it, because usually your 1-cost minions, if you're a deck full of those, you're looking to be a bit more aggressive. This is more about like playing into the board. The rush, although nice, and the attack is certainly okay too, I don't think it's worth running a fairly weak 3-drop in and of itself otherwise, and you have to have the 1-drops in hand, which makes it only good on future turns. There are just a few different things that hold this card back to me. I don't think it's going to line up all that cleanly, and therefore probably won't see a lot of play. Mad Summoner, a new neutral demon, 6-mana 4/4 Battlecry fill each player's board with 1/1 imps. So a couple things here. Big board yourself, but you probably have to resolve your opponents if you want it to be worth it. We have seen Inferno already that could lead into a nice swing turn for 9 mana. Is that much better than Onyxia, though? I don't know if that's a particularly exciting combination. That said, with cards like Jumbo Imp, which we're going to talk about soon, having a lot of imps on your board that are going to die could lead you to some big plays. That said, I still think this card's probably too awkward, and any sort of, resurrection pool disrupt that it provides is probably too expensive for a tech card. So I don't really think this is going to be a big part of either Warlock's plans or outside of that. I think it's going to feel a little bit too awkward and too hard to use, and you got to sync it up with something else. So we'll probably fall short. So now let's talk about the Jumbo Imp, which is just the coolest card ever. 10-mana 8/8 demon for Warlock, costs 1 less whenever a friendly demon dies while this is in your hand. So a bit like Corridor Creeper, but a couple of really important distinctions. They have to be friendly demons, and they have to be demons, right? So not like Corridor Creeper at all, in some way also more expensive than Corridor Creeper. So it's going to take a lot more work to get this thing discounted. It's not going to be quite as swingy as Corridor Creeper was, or as fast as Corridor Creeper was. That said, anytime you're looking at cost reduction cards like this, I think there's always potential for them to be played, and dropping an 8/8 is obviously a significant sort of play. So keep an eye on this one. I don't know that it's going to be the star. It's not going to be the dominant card Corridor Creeper was, but I think it certainly could make the cut. Kirin Tor TriCaster, a new mage minion, 4-mana 3/3, spell damage +3, but your spells cost 1 more. So really big spell damage upside here, but you're not going to be wanting to cast a lot of spells to this one, or the cost penalty will be too high. The question for this card is, it's going like head-to-head against Cosmic Anomaly. Is that spell damage +1 going to be worth the downsides to this card? I don't know. Only if the spell damage pays off in really big ways is it going to work, and probably only with bigger spells so that the discount reduction, or the reduction, not the discount, doesn't stack up too hard against you. So it'd have to be a really narrow, specific sort of environment where this is better than the alternatives. I don't know that we're going to see that right off the bat. So to me, this card's probably going to get left at the wayside, although it does have a glimmer of hope and a little bit of potential. Up next here, Sun Reaver War Mage, 5 mana, 4/4, Battlecry. If you're holding a spell that costs 5 or more, deal 4 damage. And I think this is a really powerful card. When it connects, it's going to feel great to swing the board really hard, better than something like Fire Elemental even. And I think it's going to be fairly consistent when it connects too, because a lot of classes and control decks are happy to run spells that cost 5 mana or more. Even if it totally whiffs and you have to play a 5 mana 4/4, maybe that's not the end of the world, right? But occasionally it's going to feel so good that it's going to be worth it. And for a neutral card, I think this one's actually really rather strong and constructed. Sun Reaver Spy, a new 2 mana 2/3 neutral minion Battlecry. If you control a secret, gain +1/+1, which means this ends up being a 2 mana 3/4. That might not sound that exciting, but I actually think this card has a lot of potential in an aggressive Secret Paladin deck. We've seen in the past Secret Keeper getting up to those sort of stat lines can be oppressive, and even though that's a 1 mana card, this one is a little bit more consistent in some ways. You can control when it goes off, and it's a pretty big minion for that early in the game. So the turn 1 Secret Paladin into Sun Reaver Spy on turn 2 feels really good. Now, does it feel good in other secret classes? Probably not as great, because the curve is less smooth, right? Unless you're coining a secret in Hunter or Rogue on turn 1 and playing this on turn 2. It's often going to feel a little more awkward. So it is a bit limited perhaps in its capacity to succeed, but I think it's good enough to make the cut in Secret Paladin, and I think that's going to be a good deck. So I guess I have to say this card looks pretty solid. Mysterious Blade for Paladin is another turn 2 secret follow-up. 2 mana 2/2 weapon, Battlecry. If you control a secret, gain +1 attack, which makes it that wonderful Fiery War Axe stat line. And we all know how good Fiery War Axe can be. The only challenge here is you don't always have a secret on turn 1, but you know what? I think a 2 mana 2/2 weapon's fine, and even later in the game, it's still often going to be a 3/2 weapon. So I think it looks fantastic. Fire War Axe is one of the best cards we've ever had in Hearthstone. This is both aggressive and defensive, and I think fits perfectly into what Secret Paladin is trying to do. So this is a really strong card. Blessing of the Ancients, a new druid spell, 3 mana, twin spell, give your minions +1/+1. So token druid support, but unfortunately, I think it's going to be a little bit too slow. When we compare this to like Mark of the Lotus back in the day, a 1 mana +1/+1, it's a lot more expensive. And although the twin spell gives you more value, so you can do it multiple times, I just don't think it's efficient enough. It doesn't pack enough punch for its cost in a deck where you're probably going to be more prioritizing punch and aggression and speed and momentum as opposed to just raw value. So to me, Blessing of the Ancients is probably going to come up short when I compare it to all the other things, the Savage Roars, Power of the Wilds. Those just feel more efficient, faster, and I don't see that this one gets there or does enough for its cost, even with Twin Spell. So for me, just not quite that good. Acorn Bearer is a druid minion I've been waiting on a little while here to get the official name. 1 mana 2/1, Death Rattle, add 2/1/1 squirrels to your hand. I like this card. I think it's a neat little way to get started on turn 1, get some resources in hand for a token style deck. I think it's got enough that it can certainly do some work. It is more value or resource oriented as opposed to tempo. If it's summon a minion, that might be even better. But nonetheless, when you're looking to play a lot of things and get a wide board, a card like this can help you fuel that nicely. So I think it does have some potential. Soul of the Merlok, new Shaman spell at 2 mana. Give your minions Death Rattle, summon a 1/1 Merlok. And I actually think this is a really intriguing card. Not only does it have Merlok synergy potential, but it's just a sticky board sort of card, much like Soul of the Forest, which is clearly named after. It might just leave stuff around for, Flame Tongue Totems, Bloodlust, all the things that Shaman likes to do in wide board token decks. So I think this one has a lot of potential in a couple different ways. Tox Man, a new neutral Merlok, a 1 mana 1/2. Battlecry, give a friendly Merlok poisonous. And with cards like our previous one, also just really cheap throwaway Merlok minions that you tend to have, taking those and trading them into a big taunt can be a really powerful sort of thing. And there's not much downside with Tox Man because he's a reasonably statted minion for 1 mana to build on with other Merlok buffs as well. So this, again, looks like a really strong Merlok card. Up next here, we have the Underbelly Angler for Shaman, 2 mana, 2/3 Merlok. After you play a Merlok, add a random Merlok to your hand. So this doesn't necessarily fit quite as well into the Merlok game plan as we've traditionally understood it, which is just dumping your hand and praying for the best that you can just kill your opponent before they're able to stabilize. This is more about adding some resources or value back into your hand, which can give you sort of a reload opportunity, but in particular in combination with another card we're going to talk about here in a second, and just the fact that it's a 2 mana, 2/3 Merlok, which is a reasonable building block. I think this is still a neat puzzle piece for Merlok to kind of add in and see if they can solve that reload problem to some extent. So I think this card actually has potential, mainly because of its stat line, but beyond that, just getting a couple extra Murlocs in hand in that like turn 5, turn 6, turn 7 range could be really powerful to help you get a second push and maybe get there on damage. And then we have a new Merlok legendary, Scar Gill, 4 mana, 4/4 for Shaman. Your Murlocs cost 1. Now, in a vacuum, I actually don't think this card's all that good for Murlocs. 4 mana, 4/4 is like okay, but you're gonna have to get a couple extra mana points to play additional discounted Murlocs, right? That's going to be hard to do. That means this gets decent at turn 5, turn 6, turn 7, or if it can stick on board, both of which aren't going to be that easy to achieve. But in combination with the Underbelly Angler, if you can play some really cheap 1 mana Murlocs in the mid to late game and reload your hand with a bunch of 1 mana Murlocs and start this kind of chain reload option, then yeah, that might be a way to give Murlocs a little extra depth. And you combine things like the Haggith, the hero card in that, you not only get Murlocs back in hand, but you get spells back in hand, and suddenly it's like, okay, there's this engine that turns my Murlocs into consistent resources. Maybe that works well to give this deck some depth. I honestly don't know that it's going to make the cut even in a Merlok Shaman deck. Like, it's more of a complementary piece than a mandatory aspect, but it does line up in some ways, so it has some hope for me. Moving on here, we have Mutate for Shaman, a new 0 mana spell. Fantastically cool artwork. It is basically a one-time unstable evolution, transform a friendly minion into a random one that costs 1 more. I do not think this card will make the cut in constructed Hearthstone. It just doesn't have enough value in it, but it is important that it exists off things like Hagatha, random spell generators, etc. So cool card to have in the set, but one that's just not going to see play. Up next here is Rapid Fire for Hunter, a new 1 mana twin spell, deal 1 damage. So we have a ping effect here, essentially, that you get to use twice. And that may not seem particularly strong on its own right. You know, it's like worse than Arcane Shot as a 1 mana spell, but you get to use it twice. 2 pings is not nothing in Hearthstone. That can be significant. You know, we've seen with Candle Shot in the past, having that 1 damage where you don't take damage can really help line up math. So I think it's okay there, but beyond that, this card has some really positive interactions with things like spell damage. Or for instance, Verisa, the card that I revealed. Here she is, Verisa Windrunner, where you're getting some spell damage consistently. Suddenly Rapid Fire makes a lot more sense because it's 2 cheap spells synergized with spell damage. So your Rapid Fire packs a lot more punch than it normally would. So for that reason, I think this card actually has some potential to see play in a couple different directions. I think it's a solid card. Moving on is Safeguard, a new neutral mech, 6 mana 4/5 taunt. Death Rattle, summon a 0/5 Vault Safe with taunt. And I think this is a pretty neat card. A lot of stall, a lot of disruption, has some interesting Death Rattle and mech synergies that are important for classes like Hunter in particular. Maybe also Warrior could utilize this card very successfully. So beyond having absolutely amazing flavor where it's this walking vault, that's fantastic. I actually think this card could see a lot of play as well. Speaking of Death Rattle mechs, here I have the Ursa Tron for Hunter, a new 3 mana 3/3 mech. Death Rattle, draw a mech from your deck. So reasonable stat line here. Death Rattle gives you some resources, which is nice. The one challenge I see for this card is it's not board or tempo oriented, it's more value oriented, which Death Rattle Hunter in the past has succeeded the most when it could play a lot of cool, big, crazy things. That said, you do need resources for these decks to work, and it is a mech body for magnetizing too, and it's so on and so forth. Competing though with Spider Bomb is going to be tough with that 3 mana slot in the same 2 directions, Death Rattle and mechs. So I have a feeling this one's actually going to fall to the wayside. It's a fine card in a lot of ways. It might make the cut, but it's not going to be the driving force or the thing that like scares you or defines the deck. If it makes the cut, it'll just be a complementary piece. Whirlwind Tempest, new neutral minion, 8 mana 6/6 elemental. Your minions with Wind Fury have Mega Wind Fury, which is so awesome. But unfortunately, I don't think this card will be competitive at all. Just way too hard to work with, too expensive. If you're sticking a bunch of Wind Fury minions anyway, you're probably in a good spot. So it's a win more card in a lot of ways. As cool as it is and fun as it is, and as much as I'd love to see it work, I just don't think it will. Violet Warden, another new neutral minion, 6 mana, 4/7, taunt with spell damage +1. Unfortunately for this guy, despite the fact that he does a lot of cool different things, just don't think he gets there. Not a good enough body. The stat line's okay, certainly, but not enough to make it compelling. The taunt doesn't get there. The spell damage is just mediocre. A lot of mediocre stuff added together basically means mediocre card. Violet Spell Sword, 4 mana, 1/6 neutral, Battlecry, gain +1 attack for each spell in your hand. It's not going to be hard necessarily to get to this like a 4/6 stat line where Violet Spellsword starts to make a little bit of sense. You can even get like 7/6, 8/6, all that's possible, but at the end of the day, still probably not impactful enough. I don't know, a lot of decks are going to want to use this. Maybe there's a tempo mage out there that finds a home for it because you got 6 or 7 cheap spells in hand and you just get this really aggressive minion, but you're still kind of going all in on a minion that's probably easy for a lot of decks to deal with. So unfortunately for Violet Spellsword, I don't think it's going to make the cut. Vicious Scraptown, 2 mana, 2/2 mech for warrior. Whenever this minion deals damage, gain that much armor. I actually like this card a lot. I think it's fine on turn 2 in some cases. And then when you consider the effects of magnetizing to it and getting a ton of armor out of this card on a base, that's really, really powerful upside for this. So perfect for mech warriors, particularly those who are looking to stay alive for a long time. I think Vicious Scraphound is really strong. Underbelly Ooze, neutral minion, 7 mana, 3/5. After this minion survives damage, summon a copy of it. Some cool snowball potential here, like a new Grim Patron in a way, but unfortunately a little too expensive. Stat line doesn't make up for that, so probably going to fall short. Tunnel Blaster, neutral minion, 7 mana, 3/7 with taunt. Death Rattle, deal 3 damage to all minions. I actually think this card's intriguing. It has a little bit of promise. Despite being a neutral taunt, that 3 damage AoE is really powerful. Reminds me a bit of like Primordial Drake, but a tad cheaper, not instant, but still. I think there are control decks who could probably find a good way to use this. So not going to be a staple, I don't think, but a card that could see some play. Spellbook Binder, 2 mana, 3/2 Battlecry. If you have spell damage, draw a card. Nothing wrong with this card, but I don't think it's going to be the upside necessary to make spell damage feel good. And other times it's not going to be good at all, so a card that probably falls short. Recurring Villain, 5 mana, 3/6 neutral minion, Death Rattle. If this minion has 4 or more attack, re-summon it. So theoretically, this infinitely re-summoning dude, but the problem is a big lack of consistency there. You have to keep buffing it every time it gets resummoned. So this card's going to be pretty bad. Portal Overfiend, 6 mana, 5/6 demon. Battlecry, shuffle 3 portals into your deck. When drawn, summon a 2/2 demon with rush. So we have here like a Falderai Strider type effect, but 2/2 demons with rush I think are considerably worse than 4/4s, despite the fact that they can attack immediately. I think the stat line is what would be really important. So although this minion's fine from a stat basis, it does have some upside in the long term. I just don't think you can draw enough consistently enough to make these worth it, even with like plot twist decks. I don't think this card gets there. Moving on here to Portal Keeper. It's the same idea as our previous card. 4 mana, 5/2 demon neutral. Battlecry, shuffle 3 portals into your deck. When drawn, summon a 2/2 demon with rush. So this could really build this like portal card draw deck package. Again, though, I just don't think it gets there. It's worse than Falderai Strider to me. I don't think it's going to line up with Plot Twist or Myra's Unstable Element. Having 2 of these might actually be worse in some ways than having 1. Who knows for sure. But nonetheless, I don't think either works very well. Heroic Innkeeper, 8 mana, 4/4 neutral, taunt. Battlecry, gain +2/+2 for each other friendly minion. So we have here like a Frostwolf Warlord, but way slower and super win more card. I think this one's pretty bad and will never see constructed play. Moving on here, Hinch Clan Sneak, 3 mana, 3/3 with stealth. Kind of a Jungle Panther adjacent style card. I don't think it's much better. A little bit more survivable, but probably still not enough upside in a 3-drop for this to see a lot of competitive play. I think it falls short. Flightmaster, a new neutral minion, 3 mana, 3/4, Battlecry, summon a 2/2 Griffin for each player. It's funny, I made a Flightmaster card too in one of my videos, but that was a legendary. I don't think this guy's good enough. A symmetrical effect like this can have a lot of downside, and there's not a ton of upside that I can see because the stat line on this is otherwise pretty normal. That means this card's just not good enough. Faceless Rager, a new neutral minion, 3 mana, 5/1, Battlecry, copy a friendly minion's health. I actually think this card's really intriguing, maybe even really good. Things in the past we've seen like this, Faceless Shambler, a card that was really good with like Mountain Giants and Twilight Drakes. Well, Twilight Drakes still exist, and although this comes in the curve before Twilight Drake, even on turn 5, a 3-mana 5/8 or a 3-mana 5/10 can be a pretty impactful play. I think there's a lot of different things that can get this to a 3-mana 5/6, 5/7 stat line. So I would keep an eye on this card. This might be a sleeper. It looks like a throwaway, but I can imagine some aggro decks or hand decks, with Twilight Drakes in particular, really making a use out of this card. So I like this one. Eccentric Scribe is another new neutral minion here. 6 mana, 6/4, Death Rattle. Summon 4 1/1 Vengeful Scrolls. So here, in a way, Cairn Bloodhoof alternative. But unfortunately, 1/1s are pretty throwaway by turn 6. They don't do a lot typically. I don't see a lot of decks synergizing with this, so I don't think this card's going to be all that strong. Dalaran Crusader, neutral minion, 5 mana, 5/4 with Divine Shield. I actually think this minion's okay. It's certainly going to be like a great arena minion, I'm sure. But in Constructed, there's just not going to be a lot of reasons to run this. It would probably feel okay to play a lot of the time, but decks just aren't going to make room for it. Burly Shovel Fist, a new 9 mana, 9/9 neutral with Rush. And despite the Rush giving this some immediate impact, which is way better than other just big stat minions we've seen in the past, still don't think this one gets there. There are better alternatives, cards that help you win the game. This guy just feels like filler and won't see play. Moving on to the Azurite Elemental, a 5 mana 2/7 elemental. At the start of your turn, gain spell damage +2. Interesting card here, a bit like a Doomsayer kind of effect where you're trying to get something to happen at the start of your turn. That is cool. Like, if it works, spell damage is nice. The challenge is, what spell damage deck is going to want to run this? Is the risk too great for running a, mediocre statted minion on turn 5? If your opponent removes it, you've kind of not done much. The elemental aspect could certainly help in Mage. Even if it backfires, you still get to keep a chain going. So a couple directions for this card to potentially make a home for itself. Despite that, I don't think it will. I don't think the power level's quite there. Other more consistent spell damage cards will probably beat it out, and therefore this one falls short. Arcane Servant, new neutral 2 mana 2/3 elemental. It's River Crocolisk, but an elemental. Yes, of course, it's nice to have elementals if you're trying to chain into elemental effects, but at the end of the day, this just looks really flat, really boring. I don't think this sees play. Arcane Fletcher, a new hunter minion, 4 mana 3/3. Whenever you play a 1-cost minion, draw a spell from your deck. This is an intriguing idea to help you reload some resources and maybe a spell deck that combines with low-cost minions, but I don't know what deck does that right now. Certainly Springpaw alone is a lot to empower this card, but are you going to be willing to sacrifice an important tempo turn on turn 4 to just draw some resources? And beyond that, it's not even really on turn 4, right? You kind of have to play this even later in the game to sync it all up, so it doesn't get good till turn 5, turn 6, turn 7. So for that reason, I think this card will probably be too slow, a little bit too awkward to fit into a deck, and therefore not see play. Sweeping Strike's a new warrior spell, 2 mana, give a minion, also damages minions next to whomever this attacks. Although really cool artwork and flavor here, I think this card's going to be too inconsistent. It'll be hard to have a minion that's ready to attack on board that has initiative. You could theoretically play it with charge minions, but then you're using a charge minion in a defensive fashion, which might get a little weird. So to me, I don't know what exactly is going to work well with this card and what deck would want to utilize it. Probably just better ways to do similar sorts of things to resolve a board. So Sweeping Strikes, I don't think sees a lot of play. Witch's Brew for Shaman, a new 2 mana spell. Restore 4 health, repeatable this turn. So this is basically Echo without the Echo keyword. A bit of a callback here for Hagatha, and it's a big pile of health if you go 5 times with it. That's 20 health, right? This reminds me a bit of like Forbidden Healing back in the day in Paladin. And occasionally you didn't hate playing that like 10 mana or 8 mana Forbidden Healing for Paladin. Just having that big health restoration could help you stabilize the turn. That said, I don't think Witch's Brew probably gets played a lot in a deck list, but it's really important that it exists off of spell generation effects. It's going to really swing some games off Hagatha, for instance. So a good card in one way, but probably a card that still isn't good enough to see a lot of constructed play, but certainly could still fit into a control deck here and there. Hunting Party for Hunter, new 5 mana spell, copy all beasts in your hand. So here we have sort of a War Master Voon style effect like we saw in Warrior in Rastakhan's, but for Beast, and it's a 5 mana spell, and frankly I think it's really bad. It's not got a body attached like Voon, and although Beasts are more reliable and important for Hunter than Dragons are for Warrior, still you're spending a lot of mana here on just resource generation, and it only works well when you already have a lot of resources. you already have to have the beast in your hand for this to be important or relevant. And I think Master's Call is probably just a way better alternative for Hunter to get resources. So Hunting Party to me, even with Zul's Djinn synergies, I just think this card looks really bad. Darkest Hour for Warlock, a new 6-mana spell. Destroy all friendly minions. For each one, summon a random minion from your deck. So despite all the imp cards we've seen and all these like cheap throwaway minions, I feel like Darkest Hour card that's really hard to work well with. Maybe not enough egg style effects. Building your deck in a way to support this would be really hard because you might need small minions or small minion summoning cards along with a bunch of big good minions that you want to pull out of your deck. So it seems almost at odds with itself. Seems like a very difficult challenge to make it all line up well. And ultimately, this card at a raw level just looks bad. You're destroying stuff to replace with stuff. You're losing resources. So I don't see how to make this all work together. This looks like a really bad card. And then finally, our last card is Daring Escape for Rogue. 1-mana spell, return all friendly minions to your hand. And this is the kind of card that has a lot of potential. I don't know how it's used exactly right now, but it just does something that can be very helpful. Utilizing battle cry effects, even lackeys alone right now kind of makes sense with this. And it's probably one of those cards that's gonna find a home somewhere down the line. Probably empower some ridiculously cool, crazy sort of effect. So I don't know how it works, but it's got a lot of upside. This is the kind of card that has those characteristics that are almost certainly going to succeed. So that finally wraps it up for my detailed reviews. Now let's jump into the quick reviews. Potion Vendor is a 4-star card. Dalaran Librarian is a 3-star card. Convincing Infiltrator is a 4-star card. Hinch Clan Shade Quill is a 2-star card. Arcane Watcher is a 3-star card. Unsleeping Soul is a 3-star card. Proud Defender is a 2-star card. Soldier of Fortune is a 1-star card. Waggle Pick is a 4-star card. Inferno is a 3-star card. Mana Reservoir is a 2-star card. Magic Dart Frog is a 4-star card. Magic Carpet is a 2-star card. Mad Summoner is a 2-star card. Jumbo Imp is a 3-star card. Kirin Tor TriCaster is a 2-star card. Sunreaver War Mage is a 4-star card. Sunreaver Spy is a 4-star card. Mysterious Blade is a 4-star card. Blessing of the Ancients is a 2-star card. Acorn Bearer is a 3-star card. Soul of the Merlok is a 4-star card. Tox Man is a 4-star card. Underbelly Angler is a 4-star card. Gill is a 3-star card. Mutate is a 1-star card. Rapid Fire is a 3-star card. Safeguard is a 4-star card. Ursa Tron is a 3-star card. Whirlwind Tempest is a 2-star card. Violet Warden is a 2-star card. Violet Spellsword is a 2-star card. Vicious Scraphound is a 4-star card. Underbelly Ooze is a 1-star card. Tunnel Blaster is a 3-star card. Spellbook Binder is a 2-star card. Recurring Villain is a 1-star card. Portal Overfiend is a 2-star card. Portal Keeper is a 2-star card. Heroic Innkeeper is a 1-star card. Hinch Clan Sneak is a 3-star card. Flightmaster is a 1-star card. Faceless Rager is a 4-star card. Eccentric Scribe is a 2-star card. Dalaran Crusader is a 2-star card. Burly Shovel Fist is a 1-star card. Azurite Elemental is a 3-star card. Arcane Servant is a 2-star card. Arcane Fletcher is a 2-star card. Sweeping Strikes is a 2-star card. Witch's Brew is a 3-star card. Hunting Party is a 1-star card. Darkest Hour is a 1-star card. Daring Escape is a 4-star card. And there you go, folks. Rise of Shadows review is done. Of course, I want to hear what you guys think about these cards. And now I can't wait to jump into some theory crafting to build some decks using all of these crazy new archetypes and new styles. This is going to be a pretty fun expansion, I think. That said, thank you so very much for watching. And until next time, game on.